let's jump back over to this meeting. Cool. Okay.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, I'm gonna start sharing again. All right, so if you go to a.flow.gl, you'll see in the top rightish corner, there's a little button that says documentation. So if you click on that, that'll bring you to our help center. So there's a lot of resources here. A lot of time was spent, kind of building this out, but it's of course a work in progress because our tool is constantly evolving and changing. So first thing I'll introduce is this search bar. So say there's something specific that you're looking for, like how to build custom maps. So you can search that in here and you'll see this article pops up. So you can click on it and it'll take you to this article that has a different process on how to build custom maps, for example. But also, if you just want a general idea of how to get started, we have, this page here where it's, how to load data, how to practice on a featured flow, kind of a glossary of terms that may be helpful because you're coming to these trainings and you're like, what's a swarm? They keep saying swarm. I'm not sure what that even is. So kind of introduce you to the different the terms that we may use. But also, once you get a little bit deeper into things, we have an FAQ, and let me just take you through that real quick. So we have a lot of questions that get brought in our way about security and privacy, as well as, how our data sources work, sharing and displaying, things like that. So if you click on one of those, there's these just little drop downs that we try to put in any frequently asked questions there. And then guides and tutorials, these will go more in depth on, how to actually build a flow. So in this article that we've starred, we have Bill, and Michael's kind of process for how we build flows. So Bill's is more of a document style where he goes through the different steps. I have a video playlist, which I'll navigate to real quick, where I do a little video of a different step-by-step on how to get there. Let me get back to where I was. And then Michael also has a video where he explains how to build a flow in XR. So you can kind of, get a little bit of a cooler lens on how to do that. But there's lots of great resources here, as specific as, dot sizes and colors and how that works, to broadly, like more information on the multi-user meetings that we were in earlier. And then we also have here a link to our video playlist, which is all of the previous training sessions. And so that's where this training session will also live, once we get that up and going. So if you've missed any training sessions in the past, or there's ones that you want to go to in the future, but you can't make it, they'll end up here. And we have a little bit of an inspiration blog too, if you want to, talk about like what's data storytelling, where Jason Marsh, our CEO, and I kind of had this conversation about, the different things that went behind why he built Flow and started the company. So there's a little bit there on the inspiration blog. I will say also, we do have a Discord channel that's coming. It's kind of a work in progress, so we're building that out now to kind of have a community forum where our community can interact as well as ask us a quick question and things like that. I'm going to share screen again really quick because there's something important that I forgot. And that is up here under submit a request. So say you're in the editor and something's not working quite right. You think maybe it's a bug or some feature that maybe you'd like to see, a new chart type or something like that. If you click submit a request, move all this stuff out of the way. It'll take you to this form that'll get sent right to us, and we'll be able to respond directly to you via email and figure out what may be happening. We can pass along to our engineering team to kind of really get into that. Sometimes we'll maybe schedule a a Zoom call or something if it's an issue that we can't figure out right away. But this is a great resource if you need to contact us quickly. Yeah, that's a kind of general overview of our help center, but I'll pause here for any questions that anyone has. Right, it looks like everybody's good. I guess I'll ask generally, is anyone familiar with Discord? Does anybody have any? Yeah, I see Carlos saying yes. Has anybody used any other like community forum type channels with other software that they've used in the past that they would prefer over Discord? Slack, yeah. We did try Slack for a bit, but it was a little bit hit or miss in terms of if people were able to like get in and like having to approve and like send out invitations. So it's still on our radar for something because we do use Slack internally.
Hello.
Hi, Beatrice.
Yeah, hello. Sorry, I did not. I'm not sure I had sound.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw when you were pointing to yours. I was like, oh wait, maybe.
We can hear you
hello.
fine now, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I had. Yeah, I am totally new to this flow, so I am just listening now. I had not. Get into the software yet, but I am very interested. For communication, I use something that is called Miro.
Miro, yeah.
Yeah, it's possible to at the same time communicate, with the interface.
Yeah, that's nice for like kind of doing wireframes and stuff like that. We used Miro a little bit. But welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Bill, is there anything that I missed or you think I should cover a little bit more in detail?
No, I don't think so. I think once we get all the community artifacts in place, that'll be interesting to take a tour of also. At this step of our of these sessions, and by the way, this is about the 12th session we've had, and I think almost all of them are out there on videos that can view. They're all focused on a single topic. This one happens to be more help center oriented. The other sessions we've had have been focused on particular item within item of functionality within Flow. So a couple of times what we've done is if we've gotten through the material and we don't have any more questions in that material, we provide answers to questions that haven't been asked. So one question or one answer I would have today has to do with our with getting into the Flow editor and navigating around it. Now, how many of you have actually been on the Flow editor so far? Have actually logged in and have started constructing flows?
I did 30 minutes ago. I just took a quick glance. I haven't done much.
Okay. Anybody else, or are you all just actually brand new?
I have a little experience too. I still really need to get my feet underneath me, but I've logged in and I've played around with some things.
Okay.
I did upload data, but I didn't know much after that. So yeah, I think that's why I'm here.
Okay. Maybe one thing I'll do here real quick is I will let me just take you through a real fundamental aspect of Flow, and it's one thing that I tend to hammer on quite frequently when I'm conducting training sessions and the like. Sierra, do you mind if I just spend about 5 minutes just talking about the data object timeline?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, so let me share my screen here. Okay. Yeah, so I've got a whole bunch of flows. So hopefully you can all see my thumbnails of my flows here. These happen to all be flows that have to do with these drop-in sessions and some of the topics that we've talked about before. Let me just go into one of these flows. Let me find one that's got a fair amount of texture in it, I think. I'm going to go into the use of color. Let me go into this particular flow here. This is a session that we presented, seems like about 3 weeks ago, I think it was. Okay, so when you're in the flow editor, there's a process for defining data objects that appear on steps within flow. So here, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go up to step number 3. Okay, and this happens to be a scatter plot with life expectancy over the past 150 years for about 50 countries. So it's a pretty busy flow. There's a lot going on here. We've got 50 line charts for 50 countries. We've got the labels on the line charts saying which country each one is and the like. Actually, if I go up to step 4, I think it'll be a little bit less busy. Okay, yeah. Here what I've done is I put a filter on the flow, and I'm just looking at the life expectancy curves for the European countries over the last 150 years. And on here, there are a few things, depending on what angle I look at this from. There's several things that can be seen. In around 1918, there was a large decline in life expectancy, actually all around the world, not just Europe. And this was the Spanish flu that hit in that time. In the early 1940s, there was World War II, which really caused a deterioration in life expectancy, especially for European countries, but for other countries around the world too. And if I was more of a student of life expectancy in Europe, I'd have some explanations of some of these other curves that seem to have some outlier aspects. But what I wanted to do here is just tell you an important part, once you get into flow, an important part of developing a flow that you're gonna get under your belt is navigating from this area here, which we call the data objects timeline, over to this area here where you define every data object that's on the flow. So now on this step number 4, what I have is I have a swarm, which are the dots. These are the data points that comprise each of these charts. I also have something called a connection, which is a way of connecting the dots. That's how these curves are drawn together. And I also have some labels, which are these items out here, which tell you which country you're dealing with. And each of these is a kind of a little sub-universe unto itself. And the way you navigate when you're composing a flow, you're constantly going back and forth between this data objects timeline here, where every colored cell represents a data object that's on the current step. Here I'm on step number 4. So this item here is swarm 1, which is the data for step 4. This item here is the connections, and this is the labels. So when I click into this cell here, this is the definition of swarm 1 on step 4, and that can be found over here on the right-hand side. It's a scatter plot. Year is going on the x-axis. Life expectancy is going on the vertical axis, and country is on my depth axis here. So that's the 3D. It's a 3D scatter plot. All the definition of that, color, size of the dots, everything else is over here on the right-hand corner. For the connection, I just click on the connection cell here. This is a very simple definition of a connection. So the dots are connected when the column values match by country. And that's basically all there is to setting up the connection. With the labels, a little bit more logic, but still very simple. These labels, I'm displaying country. I'm showing a label when the value of year is at its maximum point within the category of country, which means I'm putting the labels right here at the end of each of these lines. And there are a few other specification things having to do with labels. So all I wanted to say is working in flow is a constant exercise of developing muscle memory here where you're navigating between the data objects timeline and the definition of the data objects. Let me just go out here to step 11. I think this is a map. Here I've got a text object on this one. The blue is the text object, and that's this here where it says ranking of country size by population. So I won't get diverted into all this right now, but I just wanted to mention, probably my favorite topic in training on the editor is this concept of navigating between the data objects timeline and the definition of the data objects. So that was my answer for an unasked question. How about you, Sarah? What's your answer to or actually, does anybody have any questions about this? And then we'll ask Sierra what her answer is for an unasked question. Okay, back to you, Sierra.
And actually, Bill, sorry, it's Jeremy here. I don't have a specific question about what you just shown, although that's very interesting. But what I'd love to see is a few more examples of flows that you made. I saw beforehand you had a whole load of different thumbnails. It'd be lovely to see a few more examples.
Okay.
From my point of view.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's come right back to that after I give Sierra a chance to answer her unasked question. And I'll be happy to take you through some examples, or Sierra can too. Sierra,
Sure.
back to you.
Thank you.
And I'll unshare my screen for right now, Sierra.
Okay, I'm actually just going to answer a question that Ethan put in the chat as my unanswered question. Ethan asked, how does the software work with multiple people in VR? Is it similar to the desktop view? And yes, so if you are in, we kind of have two links, right? We have our standalone link where you're just by yourself kind of self-navigating the flow. And then we have our multi-user link, which is for when you have one presenter and then an audience. So if you are in the single link, it'll kind of just be the same in VR. And then if you have multiple people, you're doing the multi-user meeting, you can start that either on the browser and then go to the link. And if you're logged in as the same person, it'll transfer over, or you can start a meeting from VR, like from headset directly. And it looks pretty much the same. You'll see other people's different avatars kind of going around. So we have different icons or avatars depending on if you're on flat screen, or if you're on your phone, you'll get a little phone icon, or if you're in a headset, you'll kind of get this like ambiguous headset kind of icon. But you'll see people moving around, and if you're in VR, you'll actually be able to see each other kind of like walking around in the space and kind of pointing at things with the controller and things like that. Let me know if that answered your question, Ethan. And then I will pass it back to Bill to go through some more examples.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. I'm going to come back. I'm going to share my screen again.
May I ask Bill to sort of add on to Jeremy's question there? So I imagine many of us come to this from a analytical data science background. This is our strength, with a real interest in. We've been frustrated trying to communicate the story to the uninitiated, which is ultimately our job, and so that's what we're meant to do. And this is we're excited opportunity to do this here. Or conversely, some people might come from a storytelling background and may not have the data nerd chops that you and your team clearly have there. Is there, and those being our two likely candidates for this solution we have, is there a best practice for specifically geared to whichever camp you fall in? And so while I might understand data like the back of my hand, do regression analysis in my sleep, I don't know how to communicate that visually in a way that more people will get. And so is there a way to say, if this is your challenge you have, look to these types of visualizations to most effectively communicate that? Versus conversely, if you're trying to communicate this challenge, you should use these ones instead. And I guess more complexly the other direction if you are a storytelling person. Yeah, that's the question. So is there like I don't know if in your FAQ, if they're sort of organized in that fashion, or if you've got, as you bring examples to bear right now, if you can sort of color it with that, I think that'd be very helpful, if you can.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, let me just give a real high level description from my point of view, then I'll ask Sierra to do the same thing. You know, this data storytelling is a mating, really, of visualizations, which are technical, you know, which assist in telling the story, and a narrative, which is this, you know, the story you're trying to tell. So every presentation on one level or another is some sort of call to action. And what we want are the audiences who witness or who view or attend flow presentations. We want them to come away with a better understanding of the topic. We want them to be engaged in what's going on in the conversation. And that really is a combination of the graphics, the visuals, the visualizations that assist in that, and the baseline story that's being told. So, I mean, that's just my observation, and I'll illustrate that a little bit more when I get back to sharing my screen and showing you some of the flows we have out there. Sierra, what you probably have a different slant on that than maybe I just expressed, or you can flesh it out.
I think that it's honestly a really interesting idea as far as like approaching documentation. You know, because we do kind of see people fall into like either those two camps or the camp of, you know, I've never worked with data or design before, and I just think this is really neat and I want to get into it. So I think in addition to what you said, there is kind of the like the new user in general kind of persona as well, but creating more documentation from those lenses could be really beneficial to people, I think, because right now I think we're just trying to assume that third, like, I don't have any knowledge in this so far, and then, you know, kind of whatever you have background in, you can supplement that. But it would be helpful, you know, from a data science perspective to just go in more detailed to like, okay, how does this need to be formatted? You know, you're familiar with what a CSV file is and what tidy data is. You need to have it like this, and then go into more of the, you know, storytelling and design aspects and vice versa. So it's a great idea, and I definitely will put it into practice, hopefully, as we continue building our documentation. So appreciate that, Leo.
That's no charge. Free consulting from me. You know how I do.
That's the thing. We always have to listen to our customers. So that's how we've gotten to this point so far. So appreciate it.
Yeah, and our experience in doing implementations is that the two are so interweaved, the narrative and the visualizations, that each always change during an implementation. Like a customer will have a really good idea of what his data narrative or his data story narrative is. And then once that user sees customizations, or not the customization, the visualizations, I mean, he or she kind of modifies the narrative due to that, and vice versa. Sometimes when we get into the narrative, we think we're going down one direction with a visualization that would tell that narrative, and it occurs to us, hey, you know, this other kind of visualization would actually be more effective for doing it. So it's an extremely interesting process for putting together a total package of narrative and visualizations. Okay, so let me get back to sharing my screen here. This is where we left off. I'm just going to go back to my home screen, my home page here. By the way, I've got a filter on my flows here. These are all the flows I have in my folder that have the word drop. So drop in. That's what we're doing here. I have hundreds of flows in my folders that I get from all around the world, from all sorts of customers to take a look at. Sometimes we're assisting the customers. Sometimes they just want to show us what they've done and get our feedback and the like. So, you know, this is a small fraction of the flows that I have the privilege of seeing. So in one way or another, I've got one of the world's best jobs, because I see every day, I see some really interesting and creative things that are being done by our customers. One thing I always like to do though is point people who are new to the flow editor. I like to point them. Let me take my filter off here. I like to point them to our featured flows page. So this is on the a.flow.gl. Okay. Sierra, if you wouldn't mind just putting that URL into the chat. Out here, we've got like 25 example flows. And every one of these is different. They're all interesting. They're all, they all come at life from different perspectives. And they've all been written at different times over the last couple of years. And these are 25 flows that we think just give a really good cross-section of visualizations and stories that can be told with flow. All these are public data, so there's no private company confidential information here from any of our customers. So a lot of them have to do with public kinds of things like COVID and climate change and things like that. So what I would urge you to do is come out sometime and just cruise through some of these flows. They're all anywhere between 5 and 15 steps in length, and you'll find some fascinating stories. Let me see. Let me go into one, and a couple of these, by the way, have been published by customers. This one, how big is big tech, and the one on spreading of languages around the world, language and its origin. These are both contributed by some of our customers. So the rest have been built by people like Sierra and Michael and the like. But let me take you through this temperature anomalies. This is a fairly recent flow. I just want to show you what, in my opinion, are some of the possible types of kind of revolutionary visualizations that can be done. So to run this flow, I just clicked in the center of that thumbnail. So it's loading up right now. I think this one's got a fair amount of data. This particular flow is concentrated on climate change. And this is, here we're looking from 1880 through 2010. We've got the range of climate or the range of temperature by month over this time period. And you can see here if you look at 1880 and you look at 2020, there is an unmistakable rise in temperature going on all around the world. Okay. This particular chart, this step here shows a baseline. This is the average temperature for every month of the year. January, February, March, okay, up through December, presented in a circular fashion between 1900 and 1985. This next step, so that's kind of a baseline. We're going to be visiting that. This particular chart shows as we go in time from, and I'm just using my mouse here to scroll this, to change my camera position so I can look at this from a different angle. Here's our average here between 1880 and 1985. And this shows what the average temperature was by month. And here I'm going up to about 2020. And as I look down this funnel here, what I can see is as time is going on, as we're moving out on this curve is moving forward in time, we're seeing every month of the year is becoming warmer all around the globe. And it's becoming, especially in the northern hemisphere, it's becoming warmer faster. You can see that these lines are diverging more rapidly in recent years than they did if I went back prior to like 1980. It seems like there's a transition point right in here where things, oops, let me just get this angle better. There's a transition point kind of right in here where things really started to take off. And that looks like it's like 1985 or so. So I just wanted to show you this, and that I have never seen a better climate change visualization that shows at a glance that for every month of the year, it is getting warmer and warmer, especially in the Northern Hemisphere. We also have a parallel chart on the Southern Hemisphere, which is not as extreme. And our theory is that because the Southern Hemisphere is so much more water than landmass, that the change is a bit modified and ameliorated in the Southern Hemisphere. But anyway, this is a new kind of chart. I had not seen a chart quite like this until just the last month or so. And so, if any of you have ideas as to the types of charts that can tell data stories better, we're very interested in any ideas you have or any things you come across that just strike you as being particularly effective ways of telling a particular data story. So,
I really like that. I'm sure Jeremy bribed you to put it in centigrade instead of freedom units, but that's I still get what you mean there. I do like this a lot. It's a really nice visual in terms of what you and maybe you've called for this in other meetings. The ability to, I know death by PowerPoint something we all are trying to truly solve here, but sort of timeline pause points, or is there this way to animate essentially is what I find is the struggling point for visualization that take forever to to tell a small but important point. And so we want to be able to show a thing, pause, talk about it, and then show the rest of it in stark contrast to the initial visualization. I think that is that something that you have options for as well, or looking to implement in the future?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, I'll ask Michael to comment on that question, because he kind of has a personal mission of the mixing of timelines and geography and things like that. But yeah, absolutely agree with your point. And what we've done in this particular visualization, we've got the year kind of running vertically here, okay, and we got the month running circularly around the year, so we can kind of capture things in a way that you would not see in a normal time series chart.
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, you want to and you can let me know if you want to share, if you want to provide some of your commentary on timeline, geography, those kinds of things.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So yeah, so on the topic of, and actually, yeah, if you can stop screen sharing, I'll bring up just give you one real quick. I have it up. No, I don't have it. Okay, so I can talk about the geography aspect of it, but I think there was one point that you brought up besides the freedom units, which I really like, was that I think actually some of the power of what we do is less around the 3D aspect and more around the ability to incrementally tell a story. And I think that's what you were hinting towards as well, which is that you go across a timeline, you pause, you talk about that, then you keep going, as opposed to the current state, which is you have the full visualization and then you talk about it. And so you have to introduce every axis, you have to look at it all together, and you have to sort of dissect it. And so this was one that it was just a case example of our child's first 7 weeks of life. And so this frequency chart, we then translate from frequency to duration by adding in this time element, which is the depth. And so I could have just shown this at the start, but by incrementally doing it, it's helping build that mental model. And now I'm taking each of those and I'm stacking them on top of each other. And so I say this because I think that oftentimes the real magic of what we do, it's not about the complexity, it's not about the 3D, it's about just telling a very incremental story and allowing someone to really follow you the whole way through. And I think that empathy, that ability to really tell a story like that, I think is some of the real power here. And just on the other side of the equation for the geospatial type data, yeah, so I think there's a huge opportunity that combines geospatial data with time series data, where this is sort of something unique you can do in a 3-dimensional environment that you won't be able to do in a 2D environment unless you're just using animation. And so here in this example, we're looking at the cases of COVID in the US over the year of 2020. And it's only showing here when the cases were extreme or over a certain threshold, and the size of the dot is equivalent to the size of the outbreak. And so what's kind of cool about this is that you're combining these in sort of a unique way, but it gives you this view of space and time. And as I expand it out, you can really then see this, the winter of 2021, which sort of looms over like a storm cloud during the year. And this was the Delta variant, I believe, down here. So a little older, but I think that that's sort of an open area and has yet to be really fully explored. Is something that is unique to the three-dimensional environments. So sort of two different spans there, one of which is the, deep dive into more of the geospatial and time series and some of the unique things you can do. But then, just going back to something that's super basic, just very basic frequency data, and being able to show that on a timeline and through different steps can tell a very dynamic story. So hopefully that helps shed some light. Does that address your questions?
It does. And, I was in Belfast one season, and there's a museum there for the Titanic and the sister ships, and in particular there's a sort of timeline storytelling, a visual that you had there. I'm sure they had a lot of bunch of I guess would be euros they spent on it, but getting something in that vein to where you're able to put the pictures in there and sort of really craft that narrative with those points. Just I really like that, and I like particularly the simplicity I think is key. Overly busy visuals are impressive, but in terms of clarity, it's all about the editing process and getting rid of stuff. And that's I'll admit sometimes is where I struggle. I want all the data there, rather than really handing it to a good editor to strip away information so the salient points can shine through.
Yes.
If you can help me do that, that's great.
Oh, agree. I love it. And we've even found as well that, sometimes just showing sort of all the data in the beginning, but then zooming into a particular area, what we call is like seeing the forest and the trees, is something that we also are big proponents of as well. That there is something about seeing like the whole respondent's data set. In this case, every dot is a person that responded to a data set on salary data, and seeing each person move and go from one spot to the next actually does, I think, do something for us. I haven't quite codified it fully, but that said, I totally agree. It's not about just like the sheer quantity or complexity. It's really about helping build these really solid mental models for people. And it's all very incremental. So I think you're thinking about it right.
I have a couple comments. The first is this is it's so valuable and so powerful to the visual eye that it could become also overwhelming if we're trying to figure out how to build a model for ourselves, right? So the first comment would be, where do we start? What's step one? What I said, I built I've uploaded a data set just 10 minutes before this call, but after that I was like, okay, what do I do next? Right?
Yeah.
I work in data visualization for some time, and if you go into a Power BI, you sort of like get a very intuitive way of figuring out how to put your data into a way that makes sense. I didn't understand that from here, and I don't know if I haven't had enough time, but where do I start? What's here's the beginning, and here's that I'm holding your hand to try to build your first one. That's the first one. The second point I want to make is we work for businesses, and the way I see data is data doesn't work if it doesn't make my business better. So do you guys have any flows that show like real business cases? I want to analyze my e-com data. How can I, are there examples where I can see how my purchase funnel is affected in time, and how can I remediate that? And I love to see, like, I think the first time I saw this is like with the COVID data that about a year ago or so, and I immediately signed up for the waiting list and so on and so forth. But this is really insightful, but how do we translate that into a business solution?
Yeah, it's great points. And, if it doesn't have any value to the business, there's no ROI, it's hard to justify any of this. It's all sort of, bells and whistles. And I think the thing we've really focused on is that we are not trying to help expert to expert communication. We're trying to help people communicate to non-experts. And so that's sort of our key differentiator. It's like, we're not trying to help do the advanced analytics aspect. We're really actually trying to do the more basic. It's like, how do you communicate to the people that your stakeholders that don't know all the details, that want sort of the big high level picture, but to be able to drill into those details. And that's really the value that we've seen. And so the direct ROI we've seen is in sales use cases where people are using this in the direct sales. So it's a higher conversion rate, shorter close times. So they have less calls because the person understands it better and things like that. So that's really the thing that's been closest tied to ROI. I'll be honest in the sense that it's been hard to codify the ROI on some of these other ones, which are more of like project delivery. It's at the end of the project, or they're delivering the project, or it's part of a larger story. But the other aspect that we have been able to prove out is on the marketing side, the reach of these AR videos compared to other videos or other types of posts have a really significant value. And we try to encourage people to have a call to action for any videos they're posting, or sort of a series. Because we think of it as not like you just post a video. It's like you post a video, you have a link they can click on that then takes them into the flow. They can learn more. They can actually go into AR. There's sort of this whole span of how you communicate with someone, and that we want to hit that along multiple dimensions. To your other point of like, where do I start? So Bill and Sierra, as well as I don't know if I have one, but we have a first user guide. So it's like the first flow you build. It's like, do this one. And so Bill goes like step by step for everything you do. And Sierra also has a video series where she talks through sort of building your first flows. And I'd highly recommend sort of going through those, just get the muscle memory of like how we build those. And you'll start to see that the same sort of techniques that we use on those, you can use for almost every type of data set. Now that said, I will say that, the platform as it exists today is a lot of primitives. I think that's fair to say. It's not a wizard and like you can just very easily create these graphs. In fact, we're saying like you put the dots and then you got to add the connections. So there is a lot of primitive work, and every day we're thinking of how do we make that easier? How do we add more templates of like, here's time series data, and everyone does the same thing. But that's sort of something we'll just continue to add. But in the meantime, we're sort of at that primitive state more, and we're sort of experimenting and seeing what people are building, and we'll keep adding more robustness from there. So hopefully that addresses some of your question and sort of gives you sort of how we're thinking about it.
Yep, absolutely.
I think Carlos's point is key, but the reality is people are doing it now, right? We're doing it now with Excel or with rocks and sticks, and so the key portion for someone like for us is to be able to quantify whatever an hour is worth, right? Even if it's project completion data, and then we're able to say, well, delivering it 1 hour early is worth X. And so if there's a parameter, we could then pass that information through, or even a measure, whatever we're calling it. I'm sorry, I don't know the terminology here. To be able to input that and add it to our model, we can then even if it's a model that's not specific enough for an end user to begin putting that information in, and then just changing the key parameters that apply to them, so that we can solve some of these the issues you're talking about communicating to a non-initiated member on how the actions we are doing really are going to impact their organization in a material fashion. It's a hard thing to crack, which is to do it consistently, which is why. But the inputs aren't complex. It's just what is this thing worth? And then how do we visualize it?
Yeah, agreed. It's it's one thing to show a flow and people say it's cool, it's another thing to show a flow and then say, oh, and also 1 million people saw it. And we have all these other inbound leads now to our website, et cetera. And, I think that's you got to start somewhere, and it's usually incrementally. You show a few people and then it grows from there. But yeah, I think you guys are thinking about it right. And I'm glad that the problem we're solving, which is communicating to non-experts, is resonant to you. Because I do think there's a lot of great tools out there for expert to expert, and some advanced visualization, machine learning, et cetera. But that's not really what we're trying to solve for. Cool.
I guess,
Sorry, Michael, just to follow up on that, as Jeremy here, I am one of the non-experts that you're talking about. So I come at it from a kind of a position of ignorance a little bit, where I may have almost like a 3-dimensional data set.
Yes.
That I'd like to, create a story around for a presentation, but I don't really have any idea about how to use your tool to demonstrate that in the best way. Now, if I am, let's say a mixture of ignorant and time poor, how do I then go about creating the best demonstration with the Flow tool? I mean, is there some kind of wizard in the tool? Is there some kind of consultancy that you guys can help me with? What's the best way for me to go about it?
Yeah, great question. So we do have services we provide. So Bill helps lead our services operation. And so for lots of enterprise customers, we help build them. And we are actively working to build a marketplace. So connecting our users that are learning the tool, as well as our more established users, to help enterprise leads, because there's more people reaching out to us than we can fulfill. And we're not trying to be a consultancy. We're really trying to build the software, but we realize that that's always going to be a component. The direct answer to your question is that we actually built what we call the story creator mode. And that was really exactly for what you're describing, which is meant for a manager or someone that doesn't really want to mess with the data. You don't want to get into the weeds of things. You want to take an existing quote unquote dashboard almost and be able to weave your story into it. And so it's really meant to take an existing flow that someone had built, so an analyst or someone that's really gone in, or us, or et cetera, and then we set up the different steps, the different parameters that you can apply to each step, and then you could go in on the story creator mode. You don't need to see any of that detail, and then you can add in steps, add in narration, add in text, and then we're going to continue to add in other elements that basically allow you to tell just the story. Now, we're not selling that today because it's still, we thought it complicated what we're selling a little too much, but we do have some enterprise customers that do have this, and there are customers that are just using the story creator portion of it. So yeah, I think that is what you're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I would just add, as you get into this, if you get questions, feel free to contact Sierra or myself. I'm Bill at flow.gl, and Sierra is Sierra@flow.gl. If you shoot some questions to us, we'll respond to you as best we can. Or if you want to put your questions into our help center, we can address it there too. Let's see, I think we're probably out of time. I know I've got to run to another.
Yeah, I realize we're way over. Sorry about that.
Here, but thanks to everybody for coming on to this session. These sessions always go in, it's like flows. They go in unexpected directions, and it's always interesting. So thanks for coming on. We hold these sessions a couple times a week, and you're always welcome to attend subsequent sessions. Sierra, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
I don't think so. I appreciate everyone's time.
Great. Hey, well, thanks everybody. Good.
Thank you,
Very
guys.
nice meeting you.
Thank you very much.
You as well. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.